In the 1970s, the soaring vocals, steady beats, and rhythmic bass lines of disco dominate top 40 radio stations.
There is this old wives' tale that you could hear a disco song every 2 seconds in America.
Until a backlash leads to one of the most infamous evenings in music and baseball history. Disco Demolition Night.
Disco sucks! Disco sucks!
When you add frustration, beer, big crowds, and a bunch of records blowing up, you're gonna get chaos.
1, 2, 3! Yeah!
And that's exactly what they got.
Can you hear me out there? Let's clear the field!
By 1979, disco has not only entered the mainstream, but is dominating it. John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, the Bee Gees at the top of the charts, and the Energy at Studio 54 have made this niche music the most popular genre on the planet.
Disco became a culture as well as a type of music. So you had the discotheques, you had the big flared polyester pants, you had all of the people at Studio 54. And if you were a rock fan at the time, I'm so sorry, we don't have anything for you.
Radio stations around the country were turning left and right from, rock and roll to disco.
So that started to build up this resentment among people who were used to turning on the radio and hearing the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys.
It became so popular that there were TV ads, and your mom and your grandma were taking hustle lessons. That was, I think, the breaking point.
A 24-year-old disc jockey named Steve Dahl reaches his breaking point during a typically frigid Chicago winter in 1978.
The station he worked at was switching to disco, and they fired him on Christmas Eve.
His axe to grind with disco was personal because it cost him a job.
And he went over to a competing station, so he found his home and a fertile ground to spread an anti-disco message.
I'd like to show you how we destroy the disco records. I have to kind of get worked up a little bit.
Psych Josh.
And then I just... Oh, that felt good.
He became the leader of the anti-disco movement.
Now from Chicago, here's Mr. Steve Dahl, a disc jockey at WLUP-FM.
Steve Dahl has this idea that he's going to have a disco demolition night.
He invited everybody who also hated disco as much as he did to come to Comiskey Park.
Steve Dahl was going to go out onto the field and use dynamite to blow up the records that all the people brought in.
Comiskey Park is Major League Baseball's oldest stadium at the time, and home to one of its worst teams, the Chicago White Sox. Owner Bill Veeck is something of a promoter himself, and he sparks to the opportunity to fill seats at a doubleheader.
Hello again, everybody. Harry Carey and Jimmy Pearsall from Comiskey Park, where we're going to have a wild night tonight.
Fans who bring a disco record get in for 98 cents.
They thought, oh, great, that's going to bring like maybe 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people to the stadium.
Look at that crowd out there. They filled this ballpark.
Instead, 50,000 people show up, the largest crowd of the year, and security turns away thousands more.
They're drunk, they're excited to watch disco records get blown up.
Great night for a ball game and a great night for a disco destruction, I might say.
Who knows what they thought was going to happen, but what actually happened was pure mayhem.
Fans are already throwing records, firecrackers, and empty liquor bottles at players before the first game even ends at 8:16 p.m.
He struck him out and the ball game is over.
As grounds crews prepare for Game 2, Steve Dahl circles the field in a military jeep.
Will you please welcome the Supreme Commander, Steve Dahl!
He showed up to Disco Demolition Night wearing full-on, military garb. It was like a generalissimo in a marauding army.
Disco sucks! Disco sucks! Well, listen, we took all the disco records that you brought tonight, and we're going to blow them up real good.
disaster, chaos ensues in the park. And these people rush the field, they're tearing up, they rip home plate up and throw it around. People lose their mind.
One of the saddest sights I've ever seen in a ballpark in my life. This has turned into a fiasco.
That is not really about disco at this point. It is really about just a mob going crazy.
This is Belbeck. Please clear the field.
Police arrest nearly 40 people for disorderly conduct.
Little did we know it would be the explosion heard around the world, because it turned into such chaos that it made the news all over the country.
While Steve Dahl shrugs off Disco Demolition Night as a publicity stunt gone awry, the message coming out of Chicago spreads, fueling anti-disco sentiment across the nation.
Disco almost immediately disappeared from the charts after this happened, and I do think it's because this riot showed that people were sick of it.
Many radio stations won't play any music associated with disco.
Did this night actually kill disco?
The answer is yes and no. Disco as a culture ended. But the secret is that disco came back in a different name. You cannot actually kill disco.
When disco becomes a dirty word, it's rebranded as dance, and it evolves into some of the most popular genres of music around the globe.
It's sort of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Disco became, all the genres that we know today as electronic music. So in a lot of ways, disco is still the biggest genre in the world.